do. My desires will be...
Known for her reputation as one of the most esteemed biologists in Eastern Europe, Mother Miranda eventually went on to lead a cult in the Resident Evil universe. After she lost her child to the Spanish flu, Miranda was also infected by the mold, but she refused to let this deter her. Instead, she used this experience to enhance her knowledge of the infection, and even gain supernatural powers that helped her expand her kingdom. Today, we'll explore her story arc and unique physiological details, and tell you everything there is to know about this phenomenal character from Resident Evil. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, let's begin.
Miranda. Enough.
How did Miranda become Mother Miranda? Miranda's origins can be traced all the way back to the late 19th century, when she was first spotted in an agrarian mountain settlement in Eastern Europe. In 1909, Miranda gave birth to her daughter Eva, but she soon lost her to the Spanish flu pandemic in 1919. The circumstances at the time were so horrible that most survivors were forced to bury their family members outside the village, and it devastated her to such a great extent that Miranda almost contemplated suicide. She made her way to a nearby cave to go through with this plan, but she encountered an ancient fungal supercolony before she could claim her life. She referred to this fungus as the mold, and even went as far as to touch it. As soon as she came in contact with it, she had a vision of all the people who had died due to this fungus across the centuries, and Miranda believed that she could use it to resurrect her daughter. In a state of grief, Miranda started worshipping the fungus as the Black God, and ventured out of the cave to infect a bunch of villagers with it. This magically cured them, and Miranda then started referring to herself as the prophet of this fungus god. She was also asked to give a few sermons at a nearby church, and the villagers were experiencing the mind-altering effects of the fungus when she addressed them. In this state, the villagers were convinced that Miranda was a goddess, and they gave up Christianity to convert to her pagan cult. Soon enough, her cult started referring to her as Mother, and Miranda dedicated her life toward researching the mold. She set up several labs under the village and ceremony sites, where she would lead several experiments to test out the mold's capabilities. During her research, she ended up creating a parasitic nematode called Cadeau, and then implanted many of these parasites in the bodies of her followers. She was trying to create a superhuman host, capable of manifesting Eva's consciousness within it, but most of her test subjects died during the procedure or turned into lichens. Miranda then exiled them in order to keep the existing villagers safe for her future experiments, and these lichens ended up creating a community outside the village. Meanwhile, Miranda shortlisted a bunch of candidates from her Cadeau experiment, and realized that they were the descendants of the four kings that used to rule these lands. While she eventually dismissed them as hosts for Eva, she left them so that they could operate as a council under her command. Around the 1950s, Miranda hired Oswell E. Spencer to work as her research assistant, even though he had no interest in her dehumanizing experiments. While Oswell was quite intrigued by her research, he refused to mutate humans to implant parasites in their bodies, and he soon left the department. Miranda was still focused on reviving her daughter, while Oswell had hoped to lead humanity's evolution into a higher being. While he left and eventually found the Umbrella Corporation, Miranda started assuming the form of an old hag in order to spy on the villagers and know what they were up to behind her back.
Don't worry. You're dead.
What was Miranda's connection to bioweapon research? A few decades down the line, a crime syndicate known as the Connections reached out to Miranda in 2000 to work with her. She then gave them a sample of the mold, as well as an embryonic clone of her daughter, and the Connections then used the mold in their attempt to create a human bioweapon. They used Eva's embryo to make duplicate prototypes, and Miranda was especially involved in the process of developing Eveline, a prototype that led to their E-Type series. As their project reached the finish line, Miranda met Eveline alongside Mia Winters and Alan Droney, but this creation was soon discovered during the BSAA investigation. Soon enough, Eveline was transported across the ocean, where her tanker crashed off the coast of Louisiana in an unfortunate turn of events.
What?
Why did Miranda abduct Rosemary Winters? Around 2021, Miranda learned that Eveline had infected Mia Winters and her husband before she was killed off by the BSAA. Moreover, this couple had conceived a child. Rosemary Winters, and Miranda was then determined to get her hands on this child, as she would be the ideal host for Eva. With some help from the connections, Miranda tracked them down and made plans to abduct the child by drugging Mia and then taking her place in the Winters household. After kidnapping Mia and assimilating her DNA to create a duplicate, Miranda disguised herself and successfully weaseled her way into the Winters home. She then pretended to be Mia for a few days, but a counter-bioterrorism unit commanded by Chris Redfield soon discovered her true identity. They cornered her and tried to shoot her down while Miranda played along and pretended to be dead. As they took her body away in the same car as Rose, Miranda soon attacked the rest of the crew and escaped with the child. She then summoned her Council of Four Lords to an ancient church, where they subjected Rose to a ritual that crystallized her body. This would ensure that she would survive any mutation during their attempts to channel Eva's spirit, and they proceeded to separate her body parts and put them into flasks. As they progressed, Miranda revealed her true intentions to destroy the entire village, and even unleashed the lichens upon them when she hit a snag. She spotted Rose's father, Ethan Winters, at the scene of the crime and soon took the form of the old hag to mislead him. She assured him that Rose was at Castle Dimitrescu and lured him into attacking Alcina Dimitrescu in the process, so that she could get rid of another powerful lord who tried to snatch away her powers. Miranda was also curious to see how the mold might affect Ethan and Rose through association, and she took all measures to kill everyone else who survived so far. She then decided that she couldn't trust Ethan and asked Heisenberg to execute him, but she soon changed her mind after Alcina Dimitrescu contacted her. This infuriated Alcina, but Ethan somehow managed to kill most of her bloodline before escaping and running into Miranda once again. Unfortunately, the poor man was unable to decipher her true identity, as she once again fooled him as the old hag, and sent him off to search for the surviving Four Lords. Over time, Miranda learned that the BSAA was running an operation around her village, after Chris Redfield had tracked it down with the help of his mercenary squad. The squad even set up their camp nearby, and Moreau and Heisenberg were all aware of the BSAA's plans. Moreover, Ethan was working with the BSAA to recover all the flasks with his daughter's crystallized organs, and he successfully found them all and took them to the Giant's Chalice to restore her body. However, Miranda observed the scene from afar and used the Black God's power to send earthquake quivers all around the place, which eventually led to an explosion. Amidst the chaos, Ethan faced Heisenberg and emerged victorious, while Miranda got her hands on the chalice and even ripped Ethan's heart out.
Beautiful daughter, come to me.
How did Miranda's reign end? Over time, Miranda patiently waited by the ceremony site for the fungal root to grow, even if it led to the complete destruction of nearby settlements. The BSAA had decided to attack her at this point, but Miranda was confident that her army of lichens and moroi would be able to defend her. However, she faced an entirely new threat when she learned that Ethan had gained regenerative abilities over time, and that he had somehow survived even after she ripped his heart out. Moreover, Rose had also reincorporated, and she was fit enough to fight back her army of monsters. Under these circumstances, Miranda failed to use her body to bring Eva's consciousness back to life, and she even learned that her own regenerative powers had weakened after Rose siphoned some of them off of her. She found herself in an extremely vulnerable state, and Ethan eventually taught her a lesson by crystallizing her body in the same way that she had crystallized Rose. As her body disintegrated, Miranda cried out loud as her consciousness merged with the Black God, while Ethan blew the place up and even sacrificed his own life to ensure that Miranda or her army of lichens could never haunt anyone again. Did Miranda truly die? While a fragment of the Black God somehow survived with Miranda's consciousness intact, she had departed the physical world and needed a host to return to the land of the living. Her consciousness floated in the realm of consciousness for several years, as she bid her time and conducted experiments on the Black God's properties in different realms. She eventually learned how to manipulate the consciousnesses stored within this entity to create an entire batch of creatures, ranging from a sadistic version of the Duke to some more duplicated copies of Rose. However, she made very little success with her experiments and eventually even ordered the Duke to destroy these Rose duplicates in a moment of frustration. Eventually, she tried to summon the real Rose to this spiritual realm by using her connection to the mold infection, and even used all forms of illusions to manipulate her. She even used one of Rose's colleagues, Charlie Graham, to guide Rose toward the Black God's realm, by tempting her with a chance to get rid of her powers. Since Rose had been struggling with them for quite some time, Miranda's offer of using a purifying crystal to lose her powers was quite tempting to her, and she almost walked right into this trap. Much to Rose's horror, Miranda revealed her true identity soon after Rose used the crystal, and the two of them ended up fighting each other. However, Ethan Winters once again stepped up to save the day, as his consciousness lurked in this realm and guided Rose toward the correct path. He once again dueled Miranda, and their battle was so intense that Ethan's consciousness was nearly destroyed, when Rose bravely stepped in and destroyed the crystal. By taking this extreme course of action, Rose regained all her powers, defeated Miranda, and erased all lingering fragments of her consciousness once and for all. How did the mold transform Miranda? While we've explored Miranda's roller coaster of a life and eventual death, let us now look at how the mold transformed her physiology. After she infected herself with the mutamycete, she could control all her cells to shapeshift, grow wings, or even access the genetic material of several other creatures through the mold's network. While she exerted some control over the mold and created projectiles out of it, the mold had also mutated her body to a point where her mouth and skin had started to crack. However, it also gave her a ton of powers and supreme control over the other infected beings, as well as superhuman strength and an impressive regenerative healing factor that made her near immortal. How does Miranda fight in Resident Evil Village? Over the course of the game, Miranda assumes many different forms in order to face Ethan at the ceremony site. In her base form, Miranda often swoops around the area and tries to stab Ethan with mold spikes, and she can even raise giant spikes to close the distance between them. She also has two tentacles that can rise from the dirt and grab her opponent, while she conjures up a fireball torrent attack. Moreover, Miranda can create a darkness effect in order to manipulate her surroundings and trick Ethan, but this effect can be countered with the help of a flashbang round. Additionally, she can assume winged form and gain about 6 wings that help her flutter around and even summon powerful fireballs. However, her most impressive form has to be the spider one, wherein she transforms into an arachnid-like being, with legs protruding out of her back. In this form, she would often stalk Ethan and try to dig her legs into his back before using her classic fireballs to knock him out. In dire situations, her character would use her mold tentacles to corner Ethan, or even summon the Black God and fuse with him to assume her ultimate berserk form. How does she battle in Shadows of Rose? In Shadows of Rose, Miranda could only access 2 forms, a winged form that comes in handy in combat, and a spider form that helps her pounce on her opponents. In both these states, she often tried to target Rose by flying at her and hitting her, or pouncing on her out of nowhere. She also had the ability to summon fireballs, dive into the ground, spin around in midair, and fire mold projectiles. What defines Miranda's mindset and behavior? More than anything else, Miranda can best be described as a power-hungry leader who would go to any lengths to succeed in her mission and bring her daughter back to life. She had a one-track mind when it came to resurrecting Eva, and she eventually deluded herself into thinking that Rosemary Winters was her daughter. This delusion then led to an extreme change in her behavior and personality, until Ethan Winters snapped her out of it by calling her out and declaring that Rosemary was not her daughter by any means. At the end of the day, Miranda could not do much to change her cruel and sadistic ways, and she continued to take great pleasure in torturing Ethan and her other opponents until her last breath. After merging with the Megamycete, her mental state further unraveled, and she turned into a monstrous, emotionally unstable being until Ethan finally killed her. How does Miranda's regeneration make her nearly unkillable? With the help of the Megamycete, Miranda has an incredibly powerful healing factor that helps her regenerate from fatal wounds in no time. She once survived the BSAA team's sniper attack, and she even recovered from 5 bullet shots directed at her head. Her regenerative healing factor worked at such express speed that it was nearly impossible to kill her, and she had managed to maintain a youthful appearance even after living for over 100 years. How does she use shapeshifting to deceive others? After coming in contact with the mold, Mother Miranda gained shapeshifting abilities that allowed her to grow wings and other body parts. She could take the form of animals or even huge flocks of birds, and she could embody pretty much any living being. Miranda once used these powers to fake death and lure Chris into thinking she had died, and she was truly one of the most skilled shapeshifters of the Resident Evil universe. What makes Miranda's physical strength terrifying? Mother Miranda was not just all brains, and she possessed inhuman physical strength that allowed her to overpower her victims. She once managed to rip Ethan's heart out with nothing but sheer force of will and physical strength, and her followers and opponents were all terrified of her displays of strength. How does Miranda manipulate the mold? Miranda's main powers lie in her ability to manipulate the fungi she discovered in the caves. She could channel the mold's powers in various ways, ranging from conjuring giant mold formations from the ground to creating mold tentacles out of nothing. She could also shape the mold to form projectiles that could destroy anything they came in contact with, and even use it to crystallize people's bodies. On a mental level, Miranda could control the minds of those who had been infected by the mold, and she exerted this power over the Lycans. She could also use the mold to create illusions and manipulate her victims, such as Rosemary Winters, and she once even performed umbrakinesis to manipulate her surroundings and distort Ethan's vision. Can Miranda resurrect the dead? Besides manipulating people and producing mold projectiles, Miranda could also channel some regenerative powers from the Megamycete. While we don't know if she could resurrect her mold-infected children, she certainly displayed the ability when she brought Rosemary Winters back to life from her crystallized, mutilated remains. What role does Miranda's intelligence play in her reign? Above all, Miranda was an extremely intelligent entity who rose to great heights as a scientist and biologist. Besides her scientific advances, Miranda also showed excellent leadership skills and was a skilled strategist who managed to corner her opponents at every possible turn. She had dedicated several centuries of her life toward learning and assimilating knowledge about every scientific branch possible, and she even taught Oswell everything he knew about mutation and genetics before he went on to form the Umbrella Corporation. She often used her intelligence to lure her opponents into traps or manipulate them with her charismatic communication skills, such as when she convinced Ethan Winters to eliminate the Four Lords. Marvelous verdict, and with that we've explored Mother Miranda's extensive story arc, as well as her impressive powers and abilities. Her charismatic yet ruthless personality helped her rise to great heights, and she truly did an impressive job of forming a cult and convincing a bunch of followers to take extreme measures to revive her daughter. She just might be one of the most interesting characters in Resident Evil, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on her in the comments below. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.